Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Wolf. I am with Parent-Family Relations, and we are going to produce one of the traditions of Germany, which is going to be pork and sauerkraut that you'll hear about and you'll see in the grocery stores very close to New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. A lot of traditions have been decided upon using pork because of it's plentiful, it's bountiful, and it's resourceable, and it is very, we call a high prosperity type of food product, and that's why we see it often in the New Year's Eve and the New Year's Day type of eating programs that we have. So we're going to use a loin of pork, which you'll see in your recipe, and we're going to serve that with an apple and caramelized onion scented sauerkraut, along with some roasted little fingerling potatoes and a German mustard sauce. So let's get started on with the pork. So for the pork, I've taken a 3-pound loin that you can find from the butcher case, and I'm just going to use a sharp knife. I'm going to do some scoring on that. We're going to cut into the pork maybe about 1/8 of an inch into the loin itself, just to be able to allow some of the wonderful ingredients that we're going to use to get into the pork loin itself. So I'm going to just make these scoring marks so they have those little X's, and those are a little more popular. But with that, I'm going to add a little bit of oil to the exterior of the pork and allow that to rub around the pork loin on all sides. In your ingredient list, you've got various things that are going to go on the pork loin. And so once I've got the pork set up like that, I'm going to take those seasonings. This one is ground sage or poultry seasoning, if that's what you have at home. Get it on all sides of the pork. Follow behind with the paprika. Adds a little color and an interesting flavor, as well as just the visual appeal. So that's going on. A little bit of dry mustard powder that you'll find in the spice aisle at the store. Get all those flavors are going to work into that, making sure I get it on all the sides. I like to get it on the end as well, and some caraway. This is optional if you like the flavor of rye bread. You're going to experience the taste that you get from caraway. Those are all very common flavors. Now I want to have some of that wonderful seasoning that we have on the sides of the pork loin as well. So whoever gets that end cut is a lucky individual because they get a boost of flavor more so than they would otherwise. So I'm going to preheat a skillet, and I'm going to start this pork loin with the fat side down in the skillet to start the rendering process. I will share with you that it's quite important to have your skillet preheated in advance so that you can maximize the color that's going to achieve in the browning. If you start out with a cold skillet, you're going to end up likely to steam the exterior of the pork because it's not going to get that crisp caramelization that's going to occur from that Maillard reaction that takes place when we have those ingredients start to color the food product. So we can hear the sound of the skillet browning the pork, and that's what we want. While that's working, I'm going to go into working with the sauerkraut. So for that, I've got some bacon that's chopped up, and we're going to allow that bacon to render out. Rendering it out is basically just allowing all the fat to melt down from the pork as it starts to sizzle. And when we get to that point, we're going to put in the onions and allow the onions to caramelize. We want those onions to get that same Maillard reaction where we get that nice caramelization of the onion as well. So we're going to keep moving this pork loin as we sear it. It gets a nice beautiful color on it on all sides, and this is something you can do while you're working on that sauerkraut. Sauerkraut's a very low, slow cooking process, but very traditional for the New Year's Eve. And you'll find when you go to the grocery that they have these on end caps in the butcher case, and that's the reason why, is because of that tradition that takes place primarily in Germany, also in Austria. And one of the neat things about Austria is they have a tradition where they use red wine drinks that are flavored with cinnamon and spices, much like the wassail that we have here in the States that a lot of folks will prepare and eat during or drink during the holiday season. Wassail is a very flavorful little dish. But the pork is basically really popular because of its prosperity and is so readily available to us, and it's very affordable as well. So we're going to let that sear and come back to the bacon and allowing it to render the fat out of the bacon. And we're going to add the thin strips or julienne cuts of onion to that saucepan. Any size saucepan will work. I like to use ones that are about a gallon measure so that I can turn the onions around and be able to make things happen without having them fall out. If you prefer to use a skillet, feel free to use a skillet. That's all up to you. I did take time to be able to dice some apples, and today I used some Honeycrisp apples because they have a nice balance of sweet and tart. Or you can feel free to opt out and use Granny Smith apples, which I think are equally as flavorful and provide you a very good finish for the sauerkraut. Get a nice sear on the exteriors of that. We'll talk about some traditions from Netherlands. Those traditions are a midnight consumption of what they refer to as the oilebollen, and that's basically a little fried balls of dough that they typically sell those on street vendor carts throughout the city during the holiday season. They're very similar to a beignet or a dumpling or a little Tim Hortons little donut hole, but they fill them with currants and cranberries to make them more exciting and more seasonal, sometimes raisins, and they dust them with powdered sugar. So we're going to let this onion mixture along with the bacon cook so that they caramelize. And what's going to happen now is I'm going to take the pork that's been properly seared out of the skillet, and I'm going to baste it with some Dijon style mustard. And I want to get that mustard slathered on there on all sides. You can use a spoon, you feel free to use your hand, whatever works for you to get it on all sides. And that's going to be a wonderful flavoring agent that goes on the pork on all sides. And we're going to roast that in the oven, about a 350 degree oven. You can put it on the bottom if you want, but I recognize that when I put the mustard on the bottom, it tends to burn and stick to the bottom, so I avoid that. So you'll find that I have the chopped herbs for this particular roast. I'm going to put those on at the end before they go in the oven so I don't sear them and overcook them. So I have a combination of thyme and rosemary, generous portion of both. I'm going to make sure that that gets basted on there quite nicely and allow that to work into the pork. I'm going to lift it up and make sure that some gets on the sides for that lucky recipient who gets the end cut, which used to be super popular for prime rib back in the day when a whole lot of red meat consumption was all the rage. And from there, I'm just going to simply put it on a non-treated pan and drop that into the oven at 350 degrees until it's fully cooked. And the fully cooked measure is going to be 145 degrees as an internal temperature of that pork. So meanwhile, we have the sauerkraut and the bacon that are working. We're going to allow those onions to pick up a nice golden color. So we'll keep an eye on those. While that's working, I'm going to work with you on the preparation for the fingerling potatoes, just simply taking a bowl and we're going to put in a measure of oil. I prefer to use olive oil because I like the flavor of it. And I toss in the potatoes. And I just bought some Russian fingerling potatoes. And those you'll find in the marketplace. You'll see various colors. You'll see purple. You'll see a mixed bag of various colors. I just opted out on the purple or the yellow creamery style fingerling potatoes. With that, I'm going to put in a little bit of chopped garlic and then the red pepper flakes. And we're just going to toss those together in the bowl so that all of the potatoes are coated with the oil and the red pepper flakes. It might seem like it's a lot, it's going to be real spicy, but truly it's not going to be. You're going to find it's very pleasant. Gives a little bit of heat, but if you don't want to use any of these ingredients that we have, the caraway or the red pepper flakes, feel free to opt out. The world is yours on what you decide to use. At this point, I would mill in some salt and pepper onto these potatoes, just milling them till they have a nice finish to them, and we're going to put those on a tray and put those in the oven and allow them to get some nice golden color on those as well. So we talked about the pork being cooked to 145 degrees. That is really the appropriate temperature according to food safety. But you could truly pull it out of the oven at 140 degrees and allow it to temp further just from the carryover temperature of that. I saved the herbs at the end to put on there, and those are going to be the tarragon, a little bit of chopped parsley, some dill. All those wonderful fresh herbs I think are going to be more flavorful than what we would have if we were to use dry. But you can certainly opt out on using dry, because you're going to spend a little bit more money using fresh herbs than you would if you were to use dry. So let's get this into the oven, and we'll let those cook until they become a nice golden brown color. And we'll use those to finish off this recipe. So we are working very hard with the caramelized onion with the bacon, although that is working very nicely. It looks wonderful. You can hear the activity of the bacon cooking along with the onions, and they're getting a nice beginning to get a golden color on the inside. You can see that. I like some of those little darker brown colors. They provide us with a little bit more taste and flavor. As you can see now on the inside, a little bit better. We want to see that nice brown color. It's going to add another element of taste for this preparation. Sometimes for New Year's Eve, I might just take sauerkraut and put it in a saucepan or a skillet and just simply add applesauce to it. Season it a little bit of caraway or some other flavoring agents that you might like to give it some character and some additional flavor. From here, I'm going to put in the apples, and the diced apples again are the Honeycrisp apples, and allow those diced apples to just get a little bit tender before we add in the sauerkraut. And after the sauerkraut, we're going to put in some fresh thyme. So again, maintain the temperature of your saucepan so you get all those wonderful, nice, rich flavors, and continue to cook down the apples. So that leaves us really with just the sauerkraut and again some milled salt and pepper for that dish, which you can use on your own. You don't have to have a pepper mill. You can use whatever is most comfortable for you to use at home. That's that. Meanwhile, let's work on the mustard sauce, which is going to finish the dish. For that, this is probably the easiest of all of our 3 or 4 recipes that we have for the German tradition, and that's going to be a Dijon style mustard. Even though it's a French town, we're going to use that smooth style mustard. You can get a smooth style German mustard if you want it to be even more authentic, but that is up to you. We're going to follow through with some mayonnaise. It can be either fat free or it could be a 50-50 olive oil mayonnaise, whatever you want to use. Little pickle relish. This is optional, but is very popular throughout Germany. Hot sauce. Today I elected to use Tabasco sauce. Horseradish to give it another level of flavor, a little bit of heat, and some American ketchup just to give it that color and a little bit of sweetness in addition to the sweetness that we have from the sweet pickle relish. Basically everything there just gets combined together to make this nice mustard sauce. This is a wonderful sauce to use as a condiment for, my goodness, a lot of things. You could use this for hot dogs. You could use it on burgers. It's a really nice, interesting sauce that a lot of folks don't utilize because they just don't know that much about it because it's not that common in society today. So we have the pork is roasting, the potatoes are roasting, the apples are becoming nice and tender in this caramelized onion mixture. And at this point, I'm going to add in the sauerkraut. And the sauerkraut, I want to make sure you drain it off really well because the sauerkraut they sell in the stores, sometimes they're in little plastic pouches. Sometimes you might find them canned. I encourage you to drain as much of the water off of that as you can because you're going to get some additional water coming from the potatoes, and you're going to get a little more from the sauerkraut after it becomes hot. So now all we're doing is heating up the sauerkraut with this caramelized onion, the rendered bacon, and the nice tender Granny Smith or Honey Crisp apples. You can use a Gala apple if you like. I just think the Granny Smith and the Honey Crisp hold up a little better, a little more dense. fresh thyme, if you so choose to. At that point, I would just strip the leaves off the thyme so that you can have the leaves whole. And those provide a very nice, bright flavor at the end. I love the flavors of fresh thyme. I love the flavor of rosemary. My favorite for eating raw is probably going to be basil, as it is for a lot of folks. It's my favorite summer herb that I like to use a lot. I will share with you a little bit about some traditions from Spain. They have what they call the 12 grapes that are traditionally started in Madrid during a festival period. And what they do is they have one grape at the stroke of 12 and one additional grape as the clock tower starts the new year. So during that first minutes of the new year, they will consume 12 grapes. Sometimes they're frozen, sometimes they're just eaten natural. And it really, people make a wish while they eat the grapes and they count their resolutions for the new year. And it started in Madrid, Spain, as I mentioned, that it has been gone to all types of cultures where Spanish-speaking countries are prevalent. So that is one of the traditions that we have for Spain. You'll see that in a lot of various places. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's very exciting. So you salt and pepper this to taste with before and after the addition of the thyme, so you have this really, you have a very nice, flavorful, wonderful addition to go with the pork. Now this sauerkraut preparation is not only exclusive for New Year's Eve. It can be used all year long. You can use it whatever you want, same as the mustard sauce. Do whatever you wish with that. So now we have the mustard sauce. We have our pork after it's roasted to an internal temperature of 145 degrees. We're going to pull that out of the oven and allow that to rest just briefly before we go to cut it. So it comes out of the oven. It's a nice, beautiful roast golden color of the roast that you have on there. You're going to have some pan drippings. You're going to make that very special. And we will come back and slice that here in a moment. Potatoes should be done shortly thereafter. And they should have a nice golden color on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to dish up this. We have that nice, beautiful flavor of those fresh herbs on those potatoes, which makes it very nice and flavorful. Fork tender is the goal for the potatoes on this platter. This is kind of a family style platter that we're preparing this today for this New Year's Eve. If you have a party, this is a really good fun item to have. It's more of a meal period type thing. You could have it on New Year's Day as your new tradition. And hopefully you'll find some really good takeaways from today's videos that we have. I'm going to pull off the sauerkraut. I'm going to drop that on the platter. It's a nice and steamy sauerkraut that we have. And put that on the platter as well so that it is going to anchor the slices of pork loin. And this could be good on any type of pork preparation. You don't have to buy pork loin. You can certainly feel free to buy pork tenderloin. Cooks a lot quicker. Prepare it the same way. All works out quite nicely. So now we have those two. I'm going to slice the pork. Again, I encourage you to allow it to rest just briefly before you slice it so that you don't allow a lot of those liquids to run through. So the lucky recipient of the end cut will have all those flavors of the pork. If it's steaming a lot when you're slicing it, allow it to cool down a little bit before you continue so that you can maximize the amount of moisture that's in the pork loin itself. But I am one of those people who really like the end cut because I'm just adamant about all those wonderful flavors. So now that we've sliced it, simply just take it and place it on the platter along with the potatoes and the sauerkraut. It's a beautiful dish, wonderful tradition. I'm going to accent garnish that with a little bit of fresh rosemary. Because they force you to buy so much at the store, you may as well use it for an accent garnish as well. And some fresh thyme, since those were some of the primary flavor profiles that we have in that particular dish. So this is our tradition for Germany that we have for New Year's Eve. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us for Parent-Family Relations New Year's Eve traditions. This is our first year. There might be future years when we do this tradition, but we're doing that this year, so you are the inaugural. Taking some of the German mustard sauce to finish this off. Go a little bit over here on the side to be able to drizzle down on that beautiful dish. Absolutely a ton of flavor and really very, very special. And I hopefully you enjoy that. And on behalf of Parent Family Weekend, we wish you a very happy, a very prosperous, and a very sensational new year with safety and health all involved as we move forward. So that is our German tradition for Parent-Family Relations. Thank you very much for letting me in your home to be able to provide you this recipe. Enjoy.